Sociologists and other social scientists often use statistics to get at underlying social facts. Here again is what Durkheim has to say. According to Durkheim, certain currents of opinion whose intensity varies according to the time and country in which they occur impel us, for example, towards marriage or suicide, towards higher or lower birth rates. Such currents are plainly social facts. At first sight, they seem inseparable from the forms they assume in individual cases, but statistics affords us a means of isolating in them. Take a look at the graph below from the New Scientist a couple of years ago. What you're looking at is a major demographic change in the U.S. Right now, most groups in the U.S. are reproducing at rates less than they need to replace themselves. But there are high fertility rates among certain groups, particularly amongst Hispanics in the U.S. The result is that by 2015, a population that will be increasingly characterized by young Hispanics and older non-Hispanic whites. And this situation is leading to the kinds of politics that we're seeing being played out in the American of November 2016. This situation is particularly worrying if you are a Republican supporter in the U.S. As it is currently structured, the Republican Party is made up of evangelical whites, rural voters, and plays on anti-government populism that is drawing on the anxiety and the resentment and a lot of anti-government rhetoric. But Republican voters are aging, and as you can see from the previous diagram, they're not reproducing themselves. These are the people that used to have good jobs. These good jobs have left the country and are no longer available to them. So for the Republican Party, certainly the issue is racism to some extent, but more importantly, there are real differences in world views and experiences of the people who are now part of the Republican Party and the growing demographic changes that are occurring in the U.S. It's quite possible to explain the popularity of Donald Trump in the context of social facts. While explaining Trump's popularity has escaped the analytic capacities of the theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, it hasn't escaped the analytic possibilities for some of the writers, for some of the more socially conscious journalists writing for European newspapers. For example, one of the writers has explained why Trump is so successful, pointing out that a map of Trump's supporters could coordinate with racist Google searches, but more importantly, it better coordinates with deindustrialization and despair, with zones of economic misery that 30 years of Washington free market consensus has brought to the rest of America. The rates of mortality have continued to rise amongst older white men, especially in areas where there are economic problems. And this is coordinated with the increase in alcoholism, opioid use, and drug overdoses, which have more than tripled since 2000 amongst middle-aged whites. Economic problems facing these people who used to have decent jobs in manufacturing, but who are uneducated and are not equipped to enter the new economy, these economic problems they're facing are quite miserable. And so there is a increased turn to drug use, to alcohol use. So there are several factors that can point to and affect the likelihood of somebody being a Trump supporter if we look at big sociological data and think in terms of social facts. The effect of educational attainment is coordinated with the likelihood of being a Trump supporter. The less education a person has, the more likely they are to vote for Trump. Being unemployed is another factor. And finally, living in areas where there has been significant losses in manufacturing jobs all point to the potential for increased likelihood of voting for Trump. This is a significant factor. And as David Lichtner of Cornell University has pointed out, there's a lot of built-in demographic momentum for future poverty and future inequality, and I might add, for continuing support of the kinds of politics that Donald Trump represented.